Good to have you with us on the Daytime Update this afternoon, Mr. Vavi. We're sitting here with our business editor, Xolani Banjwa, and he's talking about policy. And I know that you are a man who has spoken about policy and how policy, or perhaps even the lack thereof, has actually brought us to the place where we are right now. Every quarter, an incremental rise in the rate of joblessness, and it doesn't look like it's a trend that's going to be turning around anytime soon. How did we find ourselves here? And perhaps it's an important question to ask so that we can then say, how do we unravel the situation and the state, and how do we rework the future of unemployment in South Africa?
Well, it's tough, I must say. This is now getting beyond what the words can describe. This is the new low, as Xolani is saying. I mean, when we were hitting that 32.6, we said that this is the highest ever since we started to collect these statistics. Now 34.4. Remember, this is still a narrow definition. This is not yet counting workers who are too discouraged to wake up every morning and go search for employment opportunities. And I even tried to even think what that figure is going to look like now. Eastern Cape was already hitting 50%, using that broader definition. 7 out of our 9 provinces were already about 40%. And this is just such a terrible. We're absolutely dismayed. And you're asking a question where things went wrong. We inherited this from the apartheid and colonial capitalist era. So this has a long history. Its face has always been black people, women, young people, women residing in the former homelands or Badustans. That's the face of the crisis in South Africa. It has continued, unfortunately, post-1994 era because, and let's come back to your question, the government of the ANC simply refused to abandon the National Party macroeconomic policy framework, continued with it, tightened it even further as they believed that the medicine is okay. All that we needed to do is to double the dose. They doubled the dose through the introduction of gear policy in 1996. We lost millions of jobs as a result of that. And when that didn't work, they kept on doubling the dose until, in response to the 2008-2009 world economic crisis, instead of following the example laid by the United States, chose to be inspired by the German and the Eastern or the Western part of the Eastern Europe, which embarked on austerity program. So we've been cutting expenditure left, right, and center in order to meet the demands of the rating agencies. Unfortunately, we have not been restructuring the economy. We have not been addressing the crisis of industrializing or deindustrializing the bludgeoned manufacturing sector. We have done nothing to change the fiscal and monetary policies. We've done nothing to change anything. And we've allowed our minerals to continue to leave our shores and to go create jobs elsewhere where they are being beneficiated. We've done very little beneficiation in South Africa. And now the chickens are coming back home to roost, and the black people are suffering. The women, the youth of our country have no future whatsoever if you look at the numbers that have been published today. We are facing a very stubborn government that is so loyal to the rating agency, New York tycoons, but which is so disloyal to the workers who are toiling in our country, now about 12% of them unemployed. It's a very unfortunate situation of how what the ANC have turned out to be. Such a What a pity. What a pity.
Mr. Vavi, according to the official figures, today South Africa has the highest official unemployment rate in the world, followed by Nigeria at 33.3% and Bosnia and Herzegovina at 32.4%. That is a startling statistics. One thing that you have actually mentioned that keeps on being bandied about is structural reform. Tell us what sort of structural reforms that we actually talking about when we are talking unemployment that we have in this country that could be dealt with through structural reforms.
That's on the starting point. We're holding position number one amongst the industrialized countries when it comes to unemployment. We're holding position number one in the whole world when it comes to youth unemployment. We're holding the position number one in the whole world when it comes to poverty levels, as well as holding the number one position when it comes to inequalities in the entire world. Any government facing those statistics would have long admitted that our tried and tested policies have simply dismally failed the unemployed and the black people in particular, and that it is now time to change the track. It's time to go back to the drawing board and to accept that we need to look at what are the structural reforms that we must embark upon to ensure that we address the crisis of worsening unemployment in our economy. So let me answer your question. What we think we should be doing, firstly, is to restructure the entire economy and make it to be an economy based on meeting the most basic demands of workers for jobs, for food security, for clothing, and for a better education, health care. We've got to address the crisis of our dysfunctional public education that continues to sideline up to 48% of the youth and close them out. That crisis has worsened now with the coronavirus. We've got to, for God's sake, address the quality of our public education. We've seen statistic after statistics that compare us with our neighboring countries with far more lesser resources. We can't compare. They have far better education than we have. We keep on reading day in and day out statistics that shows that our children cannot read with an understanding by the time they are at grade 4 and 5, and that when it comes to mathematics, they simply cannot compete with the rest of the world. We come right at position number 3 at the bottom when it comes to those indicators. For 27 years, we have known that, and for 27 years, we have done absolutely nothing about addressing that issue. Our public health care system leaves much to be desired, completely exposed now with the coronavirus. We've done very little to ensure that we address the quality of our public health care. You cannot have a growing economy when so many of your population are trapped in a healthcare system that does not make them to be productive competitors in the economy. We've not addressed the crisis of deindustrializing. We're now sitting with a 12%. The latest statistics show that we have declined by another 2-point-something% in terms of our industrial strength. We were 22% during the apartheid era. We're down to 12% contribution of the manufacturing sector to the GDP. Where is action? We had at some point 3 documents that we call the Industrial Development Policy. Nothing, because we talk left on one side, we maintain very conservative fiscal and monetary policies on one hand. So there's no movement forward of any kind. We're trapped in one place, and that one place is that we're just going on one trend, going down. And that's the structural issues that we should be calling for.
So let me ask you, Mr. Vavi, the problems are clear and the areas for improvement have been very clearly laid out. But is there, first of all, an acknowledgement of the crisis and the magnitude of the crisis from the powers that be, as well as the will to implement the restructuring that is necessary in order to turn the situation around?
There is no will. That's what we lack. Our leadership have no political will. Our leadership have signed into the first world and developed nations rules that apply to them at this particular moment of their history. But that never applied to them when they were implementing their own Marshall Plan, facing the same crisis of underdevelopment as we are facing in this country today. That's our first major problem. We are implementing the industrialized world first-class policies. But our backlogs are massive. We should be having our own Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan that we should have can't be about creating a situation where our monetary policies lead to a situation where billionaires can put their money in the banks and still earn 4% in profit for just lying next to their swimming pool doing absolutely nothing, because we're maintaining very high interest rates in comparison to our major trading partners. It can't be correct that we're chasing an inflation target of between 3 and 6% when our unemployment rate is close to 50% when you're using the expanded definition of unemployment. We are using wrong instruments. These instruments are good for Germany, for Britain, for Sweden and other countries, but they are not good for a developing country with these levels of poverty, unemployment and inequalities.
Mr. Vavi, looking at the impact of unemployment of women, these numbers reveal that the labor market is more favorable towards men than it is towards women. Also, we're finding that those between the ages of 15 and 24 have been the hardest hit in this particular round, and their unemployment is sitting at 64%. What are the type of measures that can be put in place specifically to target women and also specifically to target the youth?
There's a direct relationship, by the way, Mdana Sekaya, between this crisis of unemployment affecting women and the statistics we were shocked reading from the Minister of Police, Bekitele, 2 days or 3 days ago. You remember he told us that in just 3 months of April until June, over 10,006 women were raped. 30% of them were raped by the people they know at home, in their family surroundings, in their workplaces, everywhere. That talk to you about the continued existing of unequal power relationships between men and women, a patriarchal system that we have not yet defeated so many years into democracy. So it is time now to begin to ask specific questions. And SAFTU have asked those specific questions. What is that we've got to do to address, in particular, the youth unemployment in this country? What is that we need to do to address the black women unemployment crisis in this country? And we have developed proposals that we have submitted in NEDLAC through our Section 77 notice, the myriad of them. And if you allow me to talk to them, I will be very, very happy to spell out what are the measures we believe we must embark upon to address, in particular, those two categories that are worst affected by the crisis of unemployment in our country.
But at the heart of it, you say it's patriarchy.
At the heart of it is that we have a system that has been designed by our forefathers, black, white, every color you can imagine. That has always been about serving the interest of men at home, in society, and in each and every workplace. That's how we are reorganized. And so those power relationships will talk to, for example, if men are in charge of all of the workplaces, if white men in particular are in charge of the economy in all of the workplaces, naturally, when they recruit, they won't go and recruit in the former Transkei, former KwaZulu-Natal, or former Bophuthatswana and all those Badustands. They will look at their surroundings. And when they look at their surroundings, they look at their families and at their friends. So you will have this perpetuation of this inequality because they will bring in men to continue to occupy better paying jobs, and that the black women in particular from the rural areas will continue to be left in their own or to their own devices. That's structural. Unless we have a government that says to the private sector, guys, 27 years we have been publishing reports of employment equity. You are not even cooperating with that. We are now going to act more than the symbolic actions that we have seen in the past. Unless we can have a government that says, guys, we see that you are earning way beyond the means of this country. You are earning millions, whilst the black workers and workers in general are trapped in unbelievable levels of poverty. We are now going to act. We don't want symbolic statements about moving towards inequalities or disclosing your salaries. We know what you earn. We are now going to impose limitations of what you can earn as a CEO, and we're going to impose initial minimum wage that provides a living wage for workers, that at the same time close the gap between you and your downtrodden in each and every workplace. We don't have that government. We just don't have the government that have guts. And I suspect the real reason why we're not moving is because our government leaders are all having private shares in these businesses. They will not raise their finger because every time they raise their finger, I guess they get told in the private sector boardrooms that you are rocking the boat. You're not going to get the levels of profit that you are getting as long as you are making this nonsense noise about radical economic transformation.
Mr. Vavi, such high statistics on unemployment are certainly going to embolden those who have been calling for a basic income grant. We saw from NEDLEC recently from unions who are saying they want a basic income grant as early as next year. What are your views on this briefly?
We are excited that finally we had a minister that have the guts to defy the treasury and put that discussion document on the table. It's now called the Green Paper. We're fine with that. We're very happy that finally we have a document on the table. The Treasury have, in the past, simply throttled even the most respected former Minister for Social Development, such as Zola Skweyiya. They've succeeded to throttle Bakabile Dlamini, and finally, we have a minister who have guts in the form of ministers who says, here is a document on the table, let's have a discussion. They are going now flat out to discredit the document and to basically say that this is not what South Africa needs. But at the same time, they cannot answer a question. Guys, didn't you see what happened in this economy on the 12th of July, when hundreds and thousands of poor people went into your shops to grab almost loaf of bread and food? Don't you know that we will have no future if such a thing was to happen full scale across the country from Musina to Cape Town? Don't you want to avoid that by ensuring that at this moment, whilst we can, before we get hit by a crisis that visited the North African countries such as Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya, Don't you think that we should, at this particular stage, make sure that we put on the table a comprehensive social security system that is underpinned by a basic income grant to ensure that we alleviate these levels of poverty afflicting the majority in the society? We think that it is being utter irresponsible for anybody, including the current Minister of Finance, to want to undermine any effort to address those levels of poverty through the comprehensive social security system, including the basic income grant. But at the same time, just this important point, we do accept that the real solution to the crisis in South Africa is an economy that will work for all the people of this country, that will address this crisis of unemployment, poverty, and inequalities. But at the same time, whilst we're doing so, we cannot close the door for the 12 million people who are unemployed and the 14 million people who go to bed every night on an empty stomach. We can't be just watching a ticking bomb continue to tick and just hope that God will save us all when it explodes.
Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi, thank you very much for your insight and your time this afternoon as we focus on the incredibly high unemployment numbers